Spiritual mediums are nothing new, but a spiritual medium who channels works of abstract watercolor art, possibly. Georgiana Houghton was a prominent figure of the early spiritualist movement in 19th century Victorian England. It's said that Sherlock Holmes called upon her services on occasion. Today, it's her channeled works of astonishing artwork that's being showcased in London's Courtauld gallery. Myriam Francois has more.
She believed that her hand was guided by spirits who helped her produce some of the first abstract paintings of the Victorian era. Georgiana Houghton was not merely an artist, she was also a spiritualist medium who believed her contact with the otherworldly realm enhanced her artistic abilities. Detailed inscriptions on the back of her watercolors point to her spirit guides, from Renaissance artists to angelic beings. But not everyone believed her work was divine.
When Georgiana Houghton exhibited her work at a prestigious London gallery almost 150 years ago, the reception to her work was so poor that it almost ended up bankrupting her. But today in London, a new exhibition aims to revive interest in her particular brand of spiritualism meets abstract art.
Dr. Ernst van Claerbergen is the curator of the exhibition. He believes Houghton was a pioneer whose work has been largely overlooked until now.
Going into the exhibition, looking around the watercolours that we brought together, you are struck immediately by the fact that this is non-figurative art, so essentially abstract art produced by a woman artist in the 1860s. And so these things are completely out of time. This is several generations before Kandinsky invents the notion of non-figurative abstract art.
Her bold colours and fluid forms have become her trademark, a uniquely intricate style which she advised audiences was best appreciated with the help of a magnifying glass. And though critics of her time may have failed to recognise her genius, today her watercolours take centre stage at London's Courtauld gallery, offering a first look at her paintings in the UK in over a century. Myriam Francois, TRT World London.
To give us more insight into Georgiana Houghton's work, art critic Gabriel Coxhead joins us now from our TRT World London Studios. Gabriel, in her time, she was dismissed and called an eccentric and an amateur. Claims of talking to the dead only added to her reputation. 150 years on, and her story is finally told. Why now?
Well, just to backtrack slightly, I think it's important to realise that although for the one exhibition she had in her lifetime in 1871, that exhibition was certainly ridiculed by the mainstream press. She was nevertheless quite an important figure in the spiritualist movement, these people who believed in talking to the dead and seances and so on. She's quite an established figure within that. And the spiritualist movement itself was quite a mainstream fad within Victorian society. You had famous politicians and scientists and artists and writers, and even Queen Victoria allegedly took part in a seance. So it was only really when these ideas began to be translated into an artistic format that suddenly the press vilified her, because of course what she was doing was so incredibly different from the normal mid-Victorian types of paintings. As to why she's so popular today and her work's been discovered, there's been a sort of trend, certainly in the contemporary art world in recent years, of a revival of interest in occultish matters. And that's been mirrored by a revival of interest art historically as well, for painters who are mediums and spiritualists. And I think it simply signifies the fact that people are always interested in new ways of conceptualizing the world and reality, and new ways of expressing our own innermost desires and strange imaginings.
So what are some of the defining characteristics of her work?
Well, the works themselves are small and medium watercolors and ink works, and they're really absolutely beautiful scroll-like splays and feathery movements of multicolored lines and bands which loop about and whirl about each other to form these dense, feathery lattice works. And on the surface of the paintings, on top of this, there are small, white, delicate traceries of jewel-like motifs and delicate lines and so forth. It really is the most mesmerizingly detailed work you can imagine. And she saw these strange paintings that she was doing, these strange drawings, as depicting an otherworldly realm beyond normal experience. And she also saw that the work she was making as being the product of collaborations with otherworldly mystical beings.
Right. Well, chronologically speaking, she is the first abstract painter. Would you agree?
Well, I think that's a very interesting question. Certainly the work she's doing is not figurative, so it's not depicting any reality that you would normally recognize. But if you compare it to, say, the works of people who are considered the pioneers, the inventors of abstraction early in the 20th century, so 50 years after Georgiana Houghton, people like Kandinsky and Mondrian Malevich. Someone like Kandinsky, for instance, he was trying to imagine a realm of emotions and to express his innermost thoughts and his inner feelings. That's very different, I think, from what Houghton is trying to do. She is depicting a world that, to her at least, is very, very real. It's just simply a world which, in normal everyday life, also happens to be completely invisible. So I'm not sure how helpful it is to use terms that were invented after her death, long after her death, such as abstraction, and to transpose them back to her. I don't think creativity works in quite that linear, historical way.
Well, tell us about the exhibition that's taking place in London's Courtauld Gallery until September 11th. What awaits visitors?
Well, the exhibition itself consists of 22 works, and these 22 works, as far as we know, apart from one or two works elsewhere, are really all that remain of Houghton's oeuvre, out of the hundreds of paintings and drawings she did in her lifetime. And very strangely, most of these 22 works somehow ended up in Australia, and no one knows how. The record of works have totally vanished from any kind of historical knowledge. And the curators have done quite a clever thing, which is on the backs of the works, on the obverse of the works, Houghton often wrote long, intense texts, again, which she felt were dictated to her by these otherworldly beings, where she would explain the symbolism of certain colors, and she would give names to who her spirit guides were, and so on and so forth. And so in the exhibition, the curators have placed several of the most extravagantly detailed works in two-sided panes of glass, so that not only can you see the front of the works, but you can go around the back and read these quite mystifying but captivating texts that Houghton has also written. And the other very interesting thing and quite clever thing that the curators have done is to replicate something that Houghton did in this one exhibition she had during her lifetime in 1871, which is to provide viewers with magnifying glasses so that you can go really extremely close to the works themselves and study them in detail. And it's a very rewarding process, because the level of detail in these works, her mark making is so precise and so incredibly delicate, like these tiny filigree marks she makes, that it's really wonderful to look at them through these magnifying glasses.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you very much for joining us from TRT World London Studios.
Great.